done one of these for a while. It's a really hot day here in London. Hopefully, I've got a fan next to me. Not a fan as in somebody like, oh, hi Maxine. I mean a blowing nice cool air fan. So hopefully that's not too noisy for you. I'm waiting for my friend Timmy Chooi. And Timmy is the last person I've done an Instagram live with. But there were so many questions we had from people saying, oh, we didn't get to this question, and would it be possible to ask some more questions? So hopefully we're going to try and answer some of them today. And of course, if you have any questions, then you post them into the comment section below. So it's 5 p.m. here in London. For Timmy, that's midday. So I know he's around. So I know he's definitely online because we just messaged. So hopefully he'll be joining us at any time. But if you have any kind of violin questions, please do ask. So let's see if this is a right. We are your fans. Oh, thank you. That's that's very kind.
Hi,
Hey,
Maxine. How are you?
so good to see you. Have you had a haircut?
I did. My mom cut it for me actually just
Wow,
yesterday.
that's pretty impressive, actually. Yeah, that's a really good haircut. I'm very, very impressed. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Is it still boiling over there? Did you have storms and things?
Yeah, we had a hurricane couple days ago, so everything kind of just washed the whole city. And now it's much better. I think it's going to be a lot cooler for the next couple of days, so not so hot.
It's still, yeah, I know. We're having sort of the hottest days so far of the year, but in a few days it's meant to have a big storm and just kind of clear it all away. So
Mm.
it's a bit hot. Well, I'm really glad to see you. And I was just saying how last time we didn't get to all the questions and people had some dealing with violin techniques
Mhm.
and how you approach things. And of course, for anyone who's watching, if you have a question for Timmy, just post it into the comments. But I'll get started on some of these questions that came in. So the first one is, if you can remember this far back, when you were starting to learn the violin, did you get muscle pains when you were practicing? Do you think that denotes that there's a problem?
Hmm. Well, I started when I was really young. I started when I was 3. So
Wow.
I don't remember so much about having muscle pains. I just remember that I would get tired sometimes. But it was really, well, my mom practiced with me. I started with the Suzuki method. I don't know what you started with, Maxine.
Oh, no, I didn't.
You
I
didn't? Okay.
got the Suzuki.
I started with Suzuki, and that was really enjoyable. I only practiced maybe 5 minutes twice a day at the most. And I remember, actually, I have a photo right here. If I can find
Oh,
it. Oh, here it is. It's funny enough that you say. That was me.
oh, that's just. Oh, you look really concentrated. Like you're really, really enjoying. Yeah,
Yeah.
got a good stance there. But I suppose because you had your older brother learning as well,
Mhm.
I suppose you kind of copied him maybe as well.
Yeah. So I actually started playing the violin because of my brother. He was, he's 5 years older than I am, so he was already, playing all day. It was like it was my alarm clock. It was the music that I slept with. So I took a pair of chopsticks and I would just furiously imitate him. And actually, then quickly after that, I saw Sarah Chang on the video on TV, and then that was my another huge inspiration just to play. And then my parents realized that I was actually starting to be very aggressive and I was hitting myself with the chopsticks in my eye. And they
Oh,
said, yeah, maybe it's time for him to start the violin. So that's how I started when I was really young. So the whole physical motion of it for me, I think, was already quite intuitive in that sense.
okay. So, but I think if you're a beginner and you're getting muscle pain, that sounds a
Mm,
bit like you're being a bit too tense, and it's definitely something one needs to talk to a teacher
mm.
probably about. Let's see. This is a bit of a sort of vague question we've got here. How many techniques are there on the violin, and do you know them by name?
How many
Oh,
techniques are there on the violin?
yes. I
Huh.
mean, I wasn't quite sure. Well,
Well, we can count it together. We've got, of course, pizzicato. We've got fast notes. I don't know what that is.
well, I mean, do they mean also, bow techniques, spiccato, up bow
Hmm.
spiccato? Um,
Down bow staccato, up bow
yeah,
staccato,
forget about those.
um, artificial harmonics, double stops, triple stops, quadruple stops. You can name it. So,
That's yeah. I think that's pretty much as far as we
yeah.
can. Oh, and somebody asks here, if you start late, say I think this person is 20,
Hmm.
can you still become a professional violinist?
Hmm. Hmm. Good question. Can you still be a professional violinist when you're 20? I think that if you work really hard and you're very dedicated, I think anything's possible. But I have to be honest, I think it is significantly much more difficult just because sheerly of time. And I
Mhm.
feel like, I mean, I've been told it's kind of like learning a language. I've heard that you can learn a language once you're over a certain age without an accent. It's just, do you have the time to actually focus, all day? Life when you get older gets more, um, you get more, you have to multitask, and
Yeah.
therefore your concentration becomes less focused. So I think it is possible, but is it realistic? I think to
Mhm.
become a professional violinist, I think there might be some challenges.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do have a friend who didn't start the violin until 15,
Hmm.
and he's a colleague of mine in the LSO, and obviously progressed very quickly. Was in sort of the European Union Youth Orchestra, as it was known. I think even 3 or 4 years later. So it's possible, but as you say, I think you're going to be have more challenges because life at 20 is going to be a lot more busy, isn't it, than when you're a kid and your mum's going, go and practice, and you've got that.
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody actually wrote here, as we were talking, somebody said, how do you prepare for a concert? So I'm just asking this person, do you mean how does Timmy prepare on the day, or sort of leading up to a concert? I guess you mean kind of maybe on the
Mm,
day.
yeah. Well, I guess they both go hand in hand. So on the day, I like to have a lot of silence around me because I feel like if there are too many noises around me, then I start to get very flustered.
Mm,
And I mean, I love noise. I love being outside. I love hearing the public and so forth. But especially, I would say 2 hours before, I need to just quiet down. And it's hard sometimes because they do ask us to, give a guest pre-concert talk and so forth, and that can be very jarring. And I've learned over the years to be able to adapt to that and be able to, have that ability to switch on my concentration and focus. I think that's fantastic training. But I think in an ideal situation, I would always love to have at least an hour, if not a half an hour, of just time to myself, quiet. So for me, anything can really go on in the day because things happen. You have to go to dress rehearsal, things pop up, emails comes up. You have sometimes to practice other pieces for another concert that's happening. But at least that 1 hour, half an hour to an hour before, I just need complete silence and
yeah,
complete focus.
yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's a sort of, there's nothing worse than just rushing on to the stage. I mean, even for me, just playing in the orchestra, when you've literally been either talking to someone and you've lost your focus, there has to be that kind of mental
Mm,
preparation, and even if it's just psychological, to make your physicality feel better about it. Actually, whoever asked that question said, also sort of in the lead up to a big concert. I guess
mm.
sometimes you can't help but there's stuff you have to do or other concerts that you're coming off the back of anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm still figuring that out. Honestly, I don't think there's a clear
Well,
answer.
one concert a week, wouldn't you, or something? You'd be like, play on a Saturday night, and then you can kind of lead everything up. But I don't think it
Mm.
ever really works like that. Um,
No, and ideally, I think you would want to have the same repertoire for at least a good 2 or 3 weeks. Because I think that would be the ideal world. It's to have one. piece that you're playing for maybe 2, 3, max 4 weeks, and that's all you're playing, and then that gives you a nice amount of like build up to each one. And ideally you start with a less important, like a less high profile one, and then go up to a high profile one, and then finish off with a fun one. But that's not how it works. Sometimes you just like bam on, you got to play with a really important orchestra with a concerto that you've played once in your life before, and you just have to take a risk.
Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? With I guess I can probably say it now. This is going back a very long time. I was still a student, and I went on tour, and it was with a famous British violinist, Iona Brown, and we did a tour. I was with the Norwegian Chamber Orchestra, and we did a tour around America, basically 5 weeks, and it culminated in a Carnegie Hall concert. And she was very famous for playing The Lark Ascending by Vaughan Williams. And I remember we did all these concerts in small towns, you know, and kind of places. And I remember thinking sometimes, God, it sounds a bit ropey. So I'm going to say it now. I mean, she was a great inspiration for me, and obviously gave me my first chance in a professional orchestra as basically still a kid. But I did think, gosh, it sounds a bit ropey. My goodness, by the time we got to Carnegie Hall, it was sublime. And I remember she also did a Mozart Sinfonia Cantatante with the principal viola. And there was one moment I was sitting like this. I thought, oh, it's so beautiful, and I just forgot to. So I do still remember that feeling. But yes, this progression of wishing that that's how it works, I guess, for you, but not always. Or someone says, oh, that iconic recording of Iona Brown, my favorite. I know she was absolutely beautiful in this kind of British music. Also, there was a question. Oh, do you have any memories where you couldn't do the technique and you wanted to cry?
Could I? Well, I feel like
Obviously
there's
not,
always
Timmy. You're obviously able to do everything.
no, no. I think if anything, I learned the most from not being able to do something. You find out with you find a solution to fake it until you make it. I
Yeah.
think that's. I mean, either you have to take a slower tempo and just go with it. I think, yeah, I think the worst feeling is when you can do it at home really well and never thought about it, and then you go on stage and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know how to control this, and how did I do it? And you start second guessing yourself. I think for me that is the most terrible feeling. But then I think I mean, ideally you sort all of those glitches and fine details in a way that you don't have to do it in front of 2,000 people. But sometimes that does happen. But I think usually once I can't do a technique, the next time I do it, at least I have an emergency plan. Like, what's going to happen if I can't do this technique? Like, one example, I'm trying to think of one. Ricochet in the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, when it comes back to the theme, it doesn't always bounce, And sometimes you need a kickstart. So sometimes like, if it doesn't bounce by then, or if my bow is too bouncy, then I have to like, maybe my arm just has to go drastically down or something, or it has to go drastically up. You start to find solutions. And same thing with shaking bow. I mean, I think we all have a shaky bow somewhere it's the worst at the end of a piece, at a quiet end of the Bruch Violin Concerto. And it's like, that.
Yeah.
So what I figured out is like, it's either like you deal with the shake.
Yeah.
I just break the bow, It's the speed of the bow that at the end it's like saving the bow, and your arm is under adrenaline, and then it just shakes. So it's just sometimes, you just gotta play two bows and let it skip.
It's about adrenaline coursing through you. This is what I've learned over 20 years. It's terrible, you're all fired up, but you have to make the smallest motions, and obviously your whole body wants to be, I suppose it's like the fight or flight response almost. It is something that every single person has had to deal with, and yes, I guess you just find a solution by maybe just taking sometimes a bit more bow. Someone says they're really glad this question got asked, so yeah, thanks for taking it in that direction for us. I just wondered if sometimes, not that you'd ever have a problem, but if you big down bow spiccato or up bow spiccato passage about to happen, you just think, no, I'll just do it separate bows. I don't think
Hmm.
you'd be in the
I
situation.
think I would have to make that decision at least 24 hours before because I feel like if I make that decision on stage, it's gonna go bad either ways. Because then you start getting confused, and your
Yeah.
mind is practiced this way, and then you're like, oh, let's do something. Spontaneity for me doesn't really work very well. I just have to say that on my end. I have to plan
Well,
everything out.
there is a reason that, repetition really helps,
Mm,
with everything, especially with, going onto stage is a pressured environment. So you
mm.
need to know that something that you've tried and tested is the way forward, and not just sort of going, oh, maybe I'll just go for something different. Someone says, have you got any tricks for committing a work to I guess from conscious reading to the subconscious memory?
Mm.
Do you sort of visualize it standing on your head?
So I guess they're asking about how do I memorize pieces,
I guess,
right? That's
yeah,
what they're
maybe
trying to
that's
say.
yeah,
Yeah. I've come to realize that some pieces are easier to memorize than others. So I think that's the once you start to realize that some pieces need more work to be memorized than others, then you can start to sort out and have different plans of attack. So for me, I think the romantic pieces are very easy to memorize. It takes a matter of repetition and enough time to just look at the score. And I guess just because so much of our upbringing has been the focus of romantic language or even classical language, once you start getting into neoclassical music like Prokofiev, Shostakovich is okay still. Shostakovich, for some reason, even though it's got a lot of very dissonant melodies and harmonies, I've been able to sort of absorb that kind of like um, Brahms a little bit, the memorization is part of it. But Prokofiev is a real stickler for me. I don't know, I can't memorize it for some reason. Like I remember I thought I had memorized it really well. It takes a different type of memorization. I think you have to have actual um, marks and pillars. And
okay,
I find that the same thing with Bach, actually. Bach is one that is you just like the fugues for me. I remember it's the weirdest thing because it does play by itself if you play at home and in front of people that you're comfortable with. For some reason, it comes out very naturally. But once you're on the spotlight, when you're in a competition, you need those visual memories. So for me, I actually have to like I remember because I played the G minor fugue first,
okay.
and it was a terrible experience. I remember I couldn't remember anything. I was playing it for some local competition in my hometown in Canada, and it was just like, was it a G minor chord or was it a G major chord? Is it like a fifth 1-1 or two? It's just all these things started to get in my mind and clouded it. But when I learned the A minor fugue, I took a very analytical approach to it. I really wrote down every kind of chunk, and to this day, I think because I learned it so slow and very methodically, I could still pick it up and I think I can still play it now. So I think every composer has a different way of writing. Something like Brahms, Mendelssohn, for some reason, those come a lot more easy.
Yeah,
And but maybe it's also because we listen a lot to these
yes,
pieces.
yeah. I think whenever I had to memorize something as a student, I tend to try to listen to it loads coming up to, the event. I have had other people say the end of Prokofiev's second concerto is really memorized. That
Yeah.
sort of thing with the orchestra, it's like a nightmare kind of
Mm.
scenario. So um, let me see. There's a couple of questions here. Oh, do you have any tips for leading as a concert master, or being a soloist? I don't know
Hmm.
how many tips
Yeah.
would be for being a soloist, but have you led orchestras before?
Yeah. Um, I've always loved playing orchestra. That's something that I've always loved, and I never had any exposure to it before I came into the Curtis Institute. And I remember the first day I came in, it was a complete. I mean, you could laugh at me for doing it because I didn't even know how to sight read first of all, and I shouldn't be sight reading. But I really thought that that was what orchestra was at the time. I was 15 at the time, and my stand partner who is very established and, you know, 5, 6 years older than I am. I remember he couldn't stop laughing. So I felt so embarrassed. But I think there's so much from that experience that really just propelled me. And I have led concertmaster most recently for Juilliard's orchestra, and that's when we met last year.
Yeah.
And I think that it's it's really an amazing feeling because you get so much say when you are concertmaster, but yet also you're protected with this nice um, support system,
Mhm.
you know, so you can lead, but also you have someone behind you that's following you. Whereas sometimes when you're on stage, I mean, ideally that's what it should feel,
Yeah.
but the amount of the fact is that you get to meet the orchestra 3 days before, and you know they want to be supportive with you, but they're, you know, sometimes you just don't understand each other's nonverbal communications. In an orchestra, because you've been playing with them for so many times, you know how to lead, what works, what doesn't. I would say, just on the experience of both, is that actually treating it both equally is, I mean, especially on the concertmaster side, treating the repertoire equally as you would with any solo violin concerto, Bach. I think that for me is the most important way to approach concertmaster leading, because at the end of the day, uh, the it's not so much about the attitude. I would say it's the attention to detail and the attention of how you're going to phrase everything. Because I feel like when I was leading, I needed to know my part so well in and out so that I could be able to adjust to the conductor's different sense of interpretation. Because I feel like if you don't really know how a piece can go, you can't really, you know, adapt.
Yeah. That's
Oops.
very true. Oh, you passed out. You, it's just your phone. No, that's really, really good advice. We've got some more questions coming in. I'll ask this one quickly. Someone was asking me what this is. It says
What is
London
that?
2012. It's the violin I played on in the Olympics, in the 2012 Olympics. I had it blinged up, and it's got the Olympic rings and the LSO logo. It was
Did you?
basically a prop because we were
Uh,
miming to a recording we'd already made. So someone just asked what that was. Someone says, can you share some tips for vibrato? I would like them as well.
some trips about vibrato. Yeah. Um, I've really worked on vibrato, especially. mm, I mean, I'm still working on it today, but I would say the biggest transition was when I entered my school here at Curtis. So my vibrato used to be very much focused on the arm type, and I think that was just how my teacher taught me before, and she grew up in um, uh, that template. And there was some really good benefits because, especially for a more narrow vibrato, that was what was needed. And I sort of started to work on my wrist vibrato, and I think that isolating and focusing on how the fingers go back and forth,
Mhm.
and sort of this pulsation of the second joint, or first joint, sorry,
Yeah.
um, it really gives you a different amount of colors. And how did I do it? I don't know. I just was really obsessive with it at one point, and I just kept recording myself. And I think when you start to use your ear to listen, your body kind of adapts as well. And it does take practice, it takes conscious thought, but I think after a while it becomes subconscious. So I would say record yourself, listen to how you want to be heard, and it's never a bad idea to also listen to some recordings. I mean, I listened to Anne-Sophie Mutter. I remember when I was like, oh wow, she has like such an amazing vibrato, and I was like, how does she do that? Because I can't, vibrate like that. So I started to analyze a little bit, just look on YouTube, and was like, oh, slow motion. There's a function on YouTube where you can, bring it down to, I think, a quarter tempo.
Wow. I should have asked her. I spoke to her 3 days ago. I should have asked her. This should have been one of my big questions. Like, how
Part
does she
two.
do your vibrato?
Part two.
Yeah, but I've also heard that what helps sometimes is because we're always thinking about gripping, and if we want to focus on vibrato, it's quite good to stand at a wall and put your
Mm,
scroll against the wall so that there's some support and you can focus on thinking about how this is all working without actually holding on and thinking, I'm going to drop my violin. So at least you
Hmm.
can kind of, I don't know, I don't have an arm vibrato, so
Hmm.
this is something that I've over the years tried to think I can sustain it for about a bar, and then I just go back to wrist or finger
Uh,
vibrato. So let's see. This is a good question, and I no way I'm going to answer it. How do you deal with a wandering mind during a performance? Ever have a malfunction, brain fart, while thinking of your upcoming pizza dinner?
Pizza dinner. Yes, I actually remember it was not so much pizza dinner, but it was more like, how am I going to spend the rest of the night watching TV shows? I think that happened to me more when I was younger. When I was doing local competitions, I remember, I think, well, I think it's different when you're younger, when you're 12 and 13 and playing pieces that you don't have much of a connection with and really just feels like almost like a chore. I mean, I love the performing experience, but there were certain times when I was like, why am I playing another Viotti concerto or Vieuxtemps concerto? And I mean, I think I realize how much I like it now, but back
Mhm.
then I was just like, I had to learn this because my teacher told me to. And then when I was doing the competition or performances, I was like, just hacking away. I think it transitioned a bit more once I started to um, practice and kind of have thoughts um, of why I'm learning a piece and uh, just having reflective kind of reasons of why I'm learning a piece, even if it's just purely just to learn technique, then to focus on a certain motion or whatever. I think that gave me purpose. And I think once you find that purpose, it becomes a lot easier to focus. And imagery, of course, with music, I mean, the concertos and so forth. Um, I think yeah, it's hard to say exactly what changed, but also the more you play for the people and publicly, I think you start to um, shrink the piece, and I think that's the most exciting time. It's when you play a huge piece like Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, which is like 35, 40 minutes, and it feels like a marathon. But then after a while, once you play it for a while, and it starts to shrink, and you can encapsulate the whole piece basically in, 10 seconds. You're like, oh, okay, it starts like this.
Yeah.
Then your focus becomes much clearer.
That's very, very good way of thinking of it actually. But I have to say it's probably more orchestral musicians that are kind of losing their focus, and because you can afford to do it occasionally like, oh, what's for dinner, or if in some city you go, oh, there's that lovely place, I hope it's still going to be open, or how long's the concert going on for. So but I'm imagining soloists are really, really focusing. Someone here says, what's the next step sort of in your evolution as a violin player, would you say? What do you think is next for you?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that right now because it's hard to say what the next step is in terms of my career. In terms of my evolution as a violinist, I think that is easier to sort of think about right now. So for me, so much of my training years have been learn as many repertoire pieces as you can, and I learned a lot. And now I think the fun part is that I can start learning pieces I really want to perform and share. And the nice thing about being online is and making all of these content for Instagram and social media is that you get to actually play pieces that you want to share, um, and no one's making you do it.
Yeah.
So for yeah, so for me, that stimulates a different part of my artistic mind, my creative mind, because now I'm starting to pick pieces. Okay, what pieces do I actually feel like I want to represent myself online? And I think that's a really good step for everyone. I've noticed that everybody's starting to play pieces that they want to perform and record online and fits their personality. Because I think going forwards, that should always be what you want to do on stage anyways. You don't want to play something that you absolutely hate but are doing for the sake because you just have to do it. That's different when you're in school because you have to learn everything. But um, for me, that's my trajectory right now. Kind of just thinking more about programming, thinking about pieces that really resonate with me. And it's always going to change as
Mm.
I get older, I
Cool.
suppose.
How old are you now?
26.
Oh, so young. And somebody, there's a big fan here. Oh my
Yeah.
God, Timothy, you're so a good player. I play the violin for already 8 years, and I've seen you playing on the Queen Elizabeth competition. And since then, this person is a big fan
Oh.
of yours. I'm going to go back to a question we've been sent in. So you started with the Suzuki method. So would you suggest that? Because this person is asking, what books, sort of core books, did you start with which obviously have some kind of levels to them? Would you suggest something like that?
Yeah, I would absolutely suggest the Suzuki method. I think that it really serves a great purpose and gets your ear listening to patterns and makes you enjoy the music from what I've experienced. And I remember that I love playing the violin, but not everyone around me in my class did, but they did love getting together
Mm-hmm.
uh, for the social
So,
experience. And I think that's, yeah, and I think that to this day, even those, many of those people that I've um, became friends with when I was really young, they haven't touched the violin since they were maybe 12, but they still have a very strong memory about the violin. And that to them, when they do see a classical music concert, it resonates with them because you're like, oh, I know how to do that. So I would recommend it for a couple years. I wouldn't go past maybe 7, maybe 8. I mean, if you start really young, I would keep at it
yeah.
for maybe 2, 3 years because there's a certain point when you need to read music. And for me, I think that was the biggest issue. I couldn't read music until I mean, I could read really slowly, but taking a sheet of music and being able to just read it slowly was impossible until I was at least 8 or 9.
And I think the second part of this person's question was like, do you need a teacher to become as good as you? I mean, I think it's
Mm.
essential to have someone who is guiding
Mm.
you in a way. There's only so much you can kind of learn by
Mm.
yourself.
Yeah, I think, I mean, when people ask me, can you help someone start the violin? I'm actually quite intimidated to do that because that's so much responsibility just to, you're basically teaching that kid how to walk. And if you don't teach them properly, they're going to be stuck with that for the rest of their lives. So I think the most important isn't so much when you're starting out, like what the teacher's reputation is in the international classical music scene. It's more about the reputation of has that person produced sort of students that have gone onwards to an nice position. And I mean, does it look good as well? I think is important because usually when it looks like it's comfortable, it usually is comfortable.
Yeah. The third part of the question, I think we kind of answered at the beginning because this person said, I'm a medical student already, but they're thinking of learning the violin and whether they could actually ever get as good as someone like you. And I think, as we said earlier, it's a hell of a challenge when you're older and you're an adult and you're doing other things and kind
Mm,
of, I think you could probably, you could get really good, really good, but you may find that to actually put those hours in, if you're also a medical student, it's probably not going to really work. An easy question: what's your favorite color to wear on stage?
mm, yeah, that's not so easy. I broke my phone yesterday and I had to order a new phone and it's taken me a lot of stress to choose which color to take. So I don't know why I'm so
What was the choice?
well, it was like white, black, red, yellow, green, or purple. So
Ah,
I have
oh,
to look
I
in
know
the
what
store.
I would.
Um, I
Easy.
think purple, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. My mom has a purple phone, so I want to make it a little different at home. But what color? I mean, I like simple colors on stage. I think on me especially, I like wearing white, black. There's something about the classic look is just it's what I grew up with. So that I've adventured to midnight blue and black. Blue and black is nice as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, I like primary colors.
Oh no, you look very smart on stage. Someone says, do you have any tips for stress right before a concert? I think we sort of said earlier that
Mm,
you like to have the quiet time because somebody said, my body starts to trill. I guess I mean shake, and I don't know how wide does that come. So
Mm.
for you, do you think it's really just having a quiet sit down and focusing?
Yeah, quiet sit down and actually not warming up too much during the day. Something about playing too much during the day, just I think it saps out the energy out of you, and then it's like, then you're trying to just have enough stamina to go on stage. And sometimes it's so um, it goes against your body's natural system because your mind is telling you you need to warm up, you need to go over those passages. But if you put all those hours in, the weeks, the months before, something about actually holding off and just going on stage. I mean, you need to touch it sometime during the day, but maybe not 100 times. But if you touch it twice and you're like, I got it, and you go on stage the third time, you're going to get it as well.
Yeah. So just to not be too like keeping
Yeah.
yourself, I always think like kind of, it's the day. There's not that much you can do anymore,
Yeah.
really.
You
So
know,
you might as well just kind of let yourself go and try and sort of visualize. I think visualization is really important. Visualize that you're really going to enjoy it. Which, because most of us can be quite negative. We can often think, oh, I might go out on stage and make a fool of myself. Or,
mm,
it's really turning that around and just being like, I could go out and just play the concert of my life. And I
mhm.
think it mentally that can really sort of help, because we're all have these sort of doubts and being far too self-aware.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
someone says it. What are the differences, do you think, of studying or having a career in America or Europe? Now, you studied just in the US, is that right?
Yeah, I studied I mean, in North America, and then I spent many summers at Verbier in Switzerland as well. So for me, I've had this hybrid. I mean, definitely much more heavily focused in America. And I would say in the past couple of years, more exposure in Europe as well. I had some private lessons here and there as well. Um, Sorry, the question was the difference between a
Like, yeah,
career or
yeah.
education?
Do you think there's a difference in the way of studying or and having a career, either or? What do you?
Hmm. Education, I can't be so specific, but I think from the little experience that I've had, um, I would say that the study requirements in North America is much more strict than Europe.
Mhm.
Um, I've heard the UK is kind of in between.
Uh,
Is
yeah.
it? I don't know.
No, I just think that I don't think it's particularly sort of strict or
Uh,
based on. I think it really depends on your teacher. But then again, haven't been a student for over 20 years, so
mm-mm,
it might be sort of slightly different.
yeah.
But I don't think we have a training ground like Curtis or Juilliard or something like that, where it's really mega sort of base. The players that come out of there are like flawless technique
Mm,
types. So, I've
yeah.
always been like, wow.
Well, don't put your hopes too high, actually. We still make mistakes. But
No.
I would say that in terms of training, in terms of the school systems, I would say that Juilliard and Curtis, from my experience, have been um, they expect a lot from you playing wise, but they also expect a lot of you contributing to the community. So they expect you to be in class when you're not out performing. They expect you to be a part of the school, to be an orchestra. And sometimes it's very frustrating because, uh, you know, you don't want to leave on the first flight out from an outside engagement at 5 a.m. because that's just horrible. But I think now looking back at it, I can see why that was so important because it brings you to a sense of normalcy. And so much of our industry, I think, does bring us out of what a lot of people can relate to. Kind of the idea of staying in one place, the idea of having a normal schedule. And I understand now. I think before I was like, oh, this is such a drag. I have to go back and do this class. But it builds a community, and it goes to show that, sometimes what happens in your career um, is not everything. So to build and to be someone or an organization that emphasizes on, your career is one thing, but you also need to have a community. It's really nice. In Europe, I feel like the community is very strong as well, but I've heard that you can kind of like go away for a
Okay.
much longer amount of time. Um, yeah, I don't know. That's, I mean, at least in Germany, from what I've
Yeah.
heard.
I
In turn,
thought, yeah, because I've never studied anywhere else, so I've never really
mm,
kind of thought about that.
yeah.
Someone says, have you ever played a work and have it genuinely affect you to the point of crying? If so, at what point was this in your life and what piece?
Huh. Hmm. I'm a shy crier, so
Oh,
uh,
oh,
but I would say there was one time when I did kind of, had a little watery eye, and that was probably playing Sibelius violin concerto. And I don't think it was so much the piece. Maybe it added. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, Sibelius does tug your heart, and it's so
oh
much.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's a powerful work, especially the second movement.
The
It's
second
just,
one,
it's like
yeah,
heavy. It's heavy, and you feel this mood.
definitely.
Um, I was playing this at a competition in Montreal when I was 16, and I just remember I was like, "Oh, I've never played this whole entire concerto the whole way through." I mean, I learned it in chunks, and every time I played it, it was such a mess. And I remember I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna pull it off." So I did it, and I just remember in the middle of the second movement, I was like, "Okay, this is going so well. Like, please don't mess up." Like, I feel really connected with what's going on right now, and I feel like I'm playing together with the piano. I'm not getting lost, and I can actually um, feel confident with sharing a piece of myself on stage.
Yeah.
And I felt so comfortable. And it was almost that, when too many things are going well, you feel overwhelmed. It's like
Oh,
it's too good to be true. So I
I know.
think that was the one time when I felt almost, very up there. I didn't
Oh,
cry, but it
that's
was
good.
very
Okay, but you
moving.
felt, yeah, like a sort of extra emotion
Mm.
of a way. Someone from England wants to know when have you got plans to come back here? Because you were here last summer. That's when we last saw each other
Mhm. Yes.
playing at the Albert Hall. So do you know if there are any plans for you to return? Somebody wants
Yeah.
to come to Turkey.
Well, I think I was supposed to come to Turkey actually
Oh,
next year, but things were on hold. In terms of England, I'm coming to Liverpool in
okay.
March of
In
next year.
March.
Yeah, so we'll see if that happens. I mean, I'm hopeful that things might at least have a new system to
Yeah.
happen. London, I don't know when yet, but Liverpool, that's March 6th of
Oh,
2021.
okay, is that with the Liverpool Phil?
Hmm.
Oh right, fantastic. Oh well, fingers crossed. I mean, at the moment, it's almost impossible for any of us to say what can happen and what might happen, or so. I think if we have things in the diary and we can look forward to them, let's just keep hoping. Someone says, "What are your thoughts on pursuing a career on two instruments like violin and piano? Are you proficient in another instrument?"
I wish I was. No, I mean, I have huge respects for people like, I think Julia Fisher. She played
She does
one.
concertos,
Yeah, didn't she do like
Greek.
Saint-Saëns 3 and then Greek piano concerto
Yeah.
in the second half? Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, no, I can't do that. Um, James Ennis, I think he did a recording of half of the CD was on the violin and the other half was piano. Yeah, I don't know how they do that. I
Too
meif
talented. This is too many.
I mean, if you can do it, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can do it, that's great. Most mere mortals can just about focus on one. Oh, this is an interesting question. As a player, when do you think was your period of the greatest growth of obviously your sort of standard of
Mhm.
playing? That's an interesting one.
Yeah, greatest growth. I would say between 14 to 17 was one period, and then I would say the next spurt came when I was 22 to now. And I would say 14 to 16 is actually because I didn't have a teacher. I didn't have a teacher for 1 year, and that was when I decided to audition for Curtis because my teacher had just retired, and I come from a really small town in Canada, so there wasn't that much access. I had to fly or drive somewhere, and I was getting some lessons, but it was only once a month, and everything else was self-learned. I watched YouTube a lot, and I think in some ways that was great. I remember I watched a whole bunch of videos, and just learning by watching. And I think that's when I saw your video too, actually, about the Mozart. I was learning that
Don't
piece,
play your Mozart like that.
but I didn't even know how to start at that time. So that gave me some building blocks, and just looking around and seeing by visualizing and practicing, that was a huge growth spurt for me. When I went into Curtis, so I said 1 year when I didn't have a teacher. The year that I did have a teacher, with my teacher Ida Kavafian, oh, I learned so much. I learned what was, from sheer live performance kind of spasm or whatever, and then what ideally should happen. So I think those 2 years really just I think turned me from someone that was just playing the violin just as a hobby to someone who's becoming a violinist. So that was the first growth. The second growth, I would say, was, as I said, in my early 20s, 22. And that was because that was the first time when I actually started to understand the stories behind pieces. You go through all the classes at Curtis and you learn about the history, but they were all so abstract. And I think because I think 22 was the first year when I really had a season lined up of concerts that wasn't just once or twice a month. And that was when I started to understand that the whole experience of being on stage and the work that you bring is not just about playing the notes, and it was so much about interpretation and the connection with orchestra. And um, I had the technique, I think, to play all of these pieces and to just bring it to the next level. I think that was the next growth, and I'm still going through that today.
Yeah. And how many hours, this sort of leads on to a question someone's asked, how many hours did you sort of practice in that teenage 14 to 17, would you say, in a day?
Way too much.
Okay.
Really way too much. I think, oh, at least 7 hours.
Yeah.
At least 7 hours. I think that was the most amount of time I've ever practiced, was 7 hours every single day.
Mm.
No break. I mean,
Oh,
not a day off. Not a day off.
okay.
I
We
mean,
meant like in one go. I thought
no,
that's
no, no, no. Oh, well, I would. There was one day when I did practice 7 hours straight, and it was too much. But
yeah.
definitely in my early teens, 14 until 18, 19, I practiced a lot.
Okay, well that's yeah. Well, I think it's it's a testament to you now. Somebody wants to know, I think, something more about you that's not violin related.
Mm.
Is there anything what interests do you have outside of outside of the violin?
Hmm. Interest outside of the violin. Yeah, I have a lot. I mean, I've come to realize after talking to a lot of my other violin colleagues and musical colleagues that I am a violin geek at the end of the day. So somehow or another, if there's a violinist playing, I'm gonna just like zone in and get distracted by that. And what I do for fun is listening to all these people play different interpretations. So that will always be my
The yeah,
biggest
violin geek.
biggest hobby, biggest career, biggest passion. It's there.
Okay.
Outside of that, I do have a thing for um, planes and how learning how things work.
Okay.
So
Well,
planes, because I happen to travel a lot. Sorry?
maybe maybe you would have been an engineer or something then.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of the mechanics that I do like to learn about. I love learning how things work. So um,
Okay.
I love, when I make a music video, I like to edit it myself because I like to see how things line up, how to edit stuff. I mean, it's very tiring and tedious, but I do like seeing that everything that looks really easy on stage or online takes a lot of these fine details that people don't even think about.
Okay.
Um, so that kind of stuff, photography, the same thing.
And
Yeah,
someone said here, what happened to your baking? So were you doing that at some time?
I had a YouTube channel when I was at Curtis.
Oh, I
How to make, what
see.
happened to that? Well, I mean, if you guys want, I'll make like a violin mukbang.
Yeah, we want to see
I'll
some.
bake something and I'll play something.
Yeah, yeah, that would be brilliant. We'd love. I mustn't forget to ask you because somebody who watched the previous chat we had said, obviously, you talked about playing the brook and breaking a string, and you took the concertmaster's violin. But that person wants to know what happened then with the concertmaster. Obviously, I know what would happen, but
Mm.
what would you say then happened?
Yeah, so I took the violin of the concertmaster. I was like, oh, this is so small. And then I gave him mine. And then I think I don't know what happened, but I assumed that he took the associate concertmaster's violin.
You would have taken someone else's, and maybe that somebody on the second desk would have changed maybe
Yeah,
your string. Did you actually get your violin back at one point?
I did right before the
Okay,
third movement.
okay, you're like, hurry up. Yeah. Okay, no, that's good. Somebody says, how important do you think scales are?
How important are scales?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do scales every day.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, at least just one. I mean, I'm not crazy. I don't go through the whole. I'm not that kind of person that's like, oh, every day you gotta do all, all the keys. I choose one. D major is like a really popular one these days. I don't know why. It's
Okay.
always been. I did the RCM. Well, in Canada, it's the Royal Conservatory of Music kind of system. I think they have one in the UK as well, where they put a set of repertoire
Yeah,
for each level,
yeah, yeah.
and
They
I
have
did
scales, yeah.
exactly
Oh,
arpeggios, dominants, diminished sevenths. So I did that in grade 10. I mean, it was called grade 10, but I was like in grade 4 or something.
okay.
And I had to learn all the Galamian style of scales. And I remember my mom's like, after I finished that, do you want to actually give up? No, you learn all of these. Do you want to give up like forgetting all of these? So why don't you do them every day? So I've just done none of sheer guilt, actually.
Okay. And someone asks, do we as violinists get annoyed by flute players nicking all our music?
That
I
was what on our music?
Because flute players tend to take our
Mm,
sonatas, don't they? I mean,
mm,
I'm
mm.
sorry, I don't like the Franck played on the flute. It doesn't bother me, but it's kind of like get your own repertoire.
Hmm. Well, I would be a lot more snarky at the flute people for playing our repertoire, but we did steal the Prokofiev Second Sonata, and I think that as long as you're okay with that, I'll be okay with you taking some of the Fauré. What else? I heard a flute play the Beethoven Violin Concerto once. Yeah,
I cannot imagine. I can't
yeah. It
quite.
was an experience. It was an experience, and um, yeah, it was a spectacle.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes things don't work so well. I mean, I think the Elgar Cello Concerto can be sort of played on the viola, but then they sort of like the octaves, they're jumping up, down. This just doesn't kind of feel, yes, yes. Someone says, do you like Zigeunerweisen? It's one of my favorites. Do you have any tips for playing Zigeunerweisen?
I love that piece. Yeah, I really love that piece. I
Right.
haven't played it for a long time, but I should maybe at some time.
Yeah.
Any tips for that piece? Hmm.
Because it has quite a lot of styles, isn't it? This whole, I
Yeah.
suppose, with Gypsy airs, obviously it ends with this great, but the whole beginning sounds almost, is it meant to sound like an improvisation?
Yeah. I think in some ways that piece is hard because you have to unteach yourself a lot of habits that your teacher constantly tells you not to do, kind of like the intense vibrato, kind of the rubato and the the snazzy kind of ending to stuff. When you play Brahms and Beethoven, of course you can't do that. But
Yeah.
when you're playing something like Sarasate, you have to actually release yourself from all of those inhibitors and just let yourself loose.
And I heard recently from my colleague who's co-leader at the LSO that Sarasate actually had really small hands.
Mm,
Yeah, so he's got very long fingers and said, hence, he Sarasate obviously found it very easy to do all these like thirds and all this stuff up here, but he actually had quite small hands, so I didn't realize that.
it's good to know. I mean, I've that's one thing I've wondered because I've heard humans also get taller over the generations and centuries. So I wonder how,
So,
like how amazing was it for someone to play an octave? Because for now, today, playing a tenth is quite impressive. But
yeah,
maybe even playing an octave back then was considered like, whoa, your hands
but
are so big.
that's an octave. Yeah, true. Well, and I suppose obviously, and also violins have just shaped. The way they were set up was very different.
Mm,
We have a specific question. Do you have any
mhm.
tips for playing Brahms Sonata G in the first movement? She's playing it in public soon. Good luck.
I played that piece um, it was my first Brahms piece ever, and I just remember it was really a journey because it was really hard. Like, I mean, of course, interpretation is very difficult, it takes a lot of maturity. But I think even the literal just rhythm of it was so difficult because it's always on a hemiola. And I would say one thing is like, it's okay to take a slower tempo sometimes, to not rush things because there's so much of this drive and pull back. Sometimes the drive doesn't need to drive so fast. Just
Yeah,
enjoy each of the melody. There's a lot of space.
it's gorgeous, isn't it? I'm planning to run through that with a friend
Mm.
in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to sound pretty awkward.
Live stream, live stream,
Oh,
live
as
stream.
if, as if I was going to be. I don't think I want anybody to kind of hear how that's going. But what can we expect? We've only got 5 minutes left. What can we
Okay.
expect from you for your What are you going to start putting up for us on Instagram? Can we see some, baking and violin playing?
Okay.
Do you have a particular sort of plan, or do you sometimes just think, oh, I really fancy doing that?
Yeah, I mean, everything that I've done online so far has been either mm, things I'm learning, or I was recording it because I was in the mood for doing it. And some of them were experimental. Like I did one that was Piazzolla, and I love that piece. And it's just not the same. You just play the solo line. So I started to play around with GarageBand and playing the cello part and starting the electronic parts. But one thing, I don't know why I'm holding this, but one thing you guys can, one thing is that that might be coming up soon, which is a little hint, is I'm planning to make a series of some folk music on the classical violin. So yes, I have always been wanting to do that, and there's a certain part of me that really likes finding classical arrangements of folk music, not just music from here, but also music around the world. So yeah, watch out for that. And of course, if you guys have any ideas, feel free to
Yeah.
DM.
And there's things like, what about even things like Scottish fiddling and stuff
Mhm.
like, all this, because they have a huge sort of folk music culture,
Yeah.
certainly England and Scotland with, this kind of thing. That would be so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, folk music for me, I
Yeah.
mean, I've never been to Scotland, so I would love to at one point. But yeah, definitely like a lot of Canadian folk pieces are out there as well. Someone, right? I see
Oh,
Korean folk music, of
Korean.
course. I mean, yeah, I did a piece by Uyghur folk music recently on my Instagram, and that, oh my goodness, I was kind of overwhelmed. I had like 70,000 views or something, and I think I had so much fun recording that. It brought out a different part of my brain, first of all. Um, and yeah, so I'm gonna be exploring that over the next couple of months.
Yeah, why not? Because I mean, especially at the moment when things are not so, you're no longer sort of rushing from place to place and sort of going by your normal concert schedule.
Mm.
If you've got an interest in doing something or a passion in doing something, then you might as well kind of explore it. And
Yeah.
someone says, I love the swallowtail jig. You'll have to look into that. I've made a recording of it, so I'll watch
Okay.
this. But thank you, Tim. We've just literally got a minute. Thanks for answering all those questions,
Or
which came in, flew in, saying like, you didn't answer this, you didn't answer this. So I think we hopefully managed to. And thank you everyone who sent in such interesting questions actually. And obviously it's hard for you to explain techniques
Mm.
to us as is, but I think you really gave us a lot to think about. So stay safe. So you're still in Philly for the foreseeable future. Sarah sent
Still in
love.
Philly.
I sent her that photo.
Oh,
You two, you look
oh
like
gosh, my hair
no,
looks like literally a
you look
bowl.
young. It was lovely, and she was like, "Oh, that is so sweet." And I said, "I'm talking to Timmy."
Oh,
Okay, so she said to send her love, but do stay safe and keep
thank you.
doing all the wonderful things on Instagram. And let's chat soon.
Chat soon. Thanks, Maxine. Thanks for having me on here. Thanks for having part two as well.
I know the only person who got a part two, so there'll be a part three. If there's enough questions, send them in, and we'll do a part three. So
Awesome.
take care of yourself now.
Take
Thanks so
care.
much.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Thanks.